I want to welcome all of our listeners and viewers to our April episode of Conversations for Change.
Mhm.
My name is Susan Schifrin. I'm the founder and director of Arts Philadelphia. And we've been marking our 10th anniversary at Arts by taking the opportunity to have conversations with longtime partners. Arts does virtually everything that it does through collaboration, through partnership. And so this is an opportunity for us to celebrate the partners who have been with us and to talk a little bit about what they do, talk a little bit about what we've done together, and ultimately talk about ways in which separately and together we can continue to make change around the lived experiences of people with dementia, their care partners, and the wider community.
Mhm.
So it is my great pleasure today to be with Rea Tajiri, who is spending time with us, having had quite a year. And I'm going to ask you to talk about that year and everything that led up to it, Rea. But I want to welcome you. And if you would just introduce yourself a little bit,
Sure.
and let's start with your own relationship, professional, personal, with
Mhm.
dementia.
Sure. So I am an interdisciplinary artist and a filmmaker. And I also teach. I'm a professor at Temple University in the Film Media Arts Department, where I teach documentary production. And my experience with dementia came in 1997. Wow, hard to believe, so long ago. My mother started developing, symptoms of a memory loss that were significant and surprising. And of course, 2 years later, she was diagnosed with dementia. And so let's see, I'll just sort of backtrack and, maybe walk through what that was like. Yeah, so, like most people, I think I was, oh my God, I was devastated. It was really scary. And I think that, again, I think the conversation then was very much a tragedy this is a very tragic thing. And it just felt like the end, the end was here. And so it was a scary time. I didn't know what to expect. And of course, you go through a sense of loss because there's a loss of abilities, and my mother changed, but of course it wasn't immediate all at once. It was just in little pieces at first. And I went through a lot of the things that people talk about, who is this person, and kind of mourning the person that she was, but then on the other side, kind of learning to accept change. And that was a very profound moment in my life because maybe I was, I don't know, close to 40 or something, but until that time, I really hadn't experienced that kind of loss or shift or change. And so it was like trying, accepting that, well, as we age, we're going to change. It's inevitable, right? And so what do we do with that? Is it just all downhill, from there? And what was wonderful is it opened up this new perspective on life. And that was very profound. And so getting back to my mom, I thought, oh, here's this person who's lived this life and she's seen all these different things that I have to, capture this. I have to preserve this. I'm going to have to, oh, hurry up. Very urgent, and not everybody around me, my siblings who are both older than me didn't necessarily see it that way, but I was, and so I was spending every minute, kind of I was living on the East Coast, flying out to California to try to, spend time with her. And then what I came to realize is that, she was having these extraordinary moments where she would become very kind of present and share these really beautiful like observations about life that were really surprising. And I would call people up and say, oh, you never believe what my mom said today. It was really interesting. And they'd say, oh, well, are you filming this? Are you filming this? Are you? And I would say no, because it was like, well, I can't film this. This is too private. And I didn't know what my mother would think. And I was also, we're just sort of in the middle of like, what is dementia? What is this thing? Right. There was stigma, and I wanted to respect her privacy. But I did take a lot of photos, and I shared them with little captions to my family and people who knew me well, and everyone was kind of into it and really liked it. And they would say, "Oh, there's a Roseism," because my son's name was Rose. Oh, there's another Roseism. Or my friends would go, "Oh, did you just come from Rose World?" Because it was like I would enter her, alternate universe, right? And then, eventually what started to happen was I realized that we connected very, like I would take her to, let's say, things that I was going to do. Like I wanted to go see an art show. I'd want to go to an opening when I was visiting her. I have a lot of friends out there, and I would go, and then she would come with me, and then she would just like really connect. And it was almost like, wait, she would just kind of open up and blossom and free associate and have these really wonderful insights and become the life of the party suddenly. People were very drawn to her. And I'm like, what is this? This is really, what's going on here? And I realized, after like looking this up and I realized, oh, there's been all this research done on how art affects the brain, and especially in dementia, and people start to come alive or connect, or they're, just all these little synapses are firing. And so it was really fascinating. And so then I started moving into like filming little clips of her, and, kind of putting that away and keeping it in an archive, and just, but over time we decided to make a film together, and it was kind of, it just kind of evolved that way into that. And I guess what was so fascinating is that like I realized that there was a whole part of my mother that I would never have had access to had she not developed dementia. Yeah. It's just you're sort of like, it's like neurodivergency, right? There's just, your brain works differently, but the way she was putting things together, she could sort of crystallize the moment. She could crystallize the present moment like a poet, but like on the spot say these amazing things. So you can see this in my film. There's that one moment we're in the museum and we just walk out completely unbeknownst to me or to her. There's this installation, and all these children are playing inside, and I'm like, should we go? Should we try this? Should we just wheel her in? Will people be okay with that? And we just, sort of timidly just kind of went in just a little bit, tested the water. And all these people were very welcome. All these kids were running around. The moms were great. They were like, yeah, come on in. Hey, everybody, make room. And within an instant, like everybody, all the kids were like, hi, and she was delighted and was like, yes. And there was this incredible interaction that we caught on film. We were so lucky. But that was an example of just how she could just magnetize people and crystallize something and express something. And it wasn't necessarily like, this big, profound statement, but it was just something about the way she could express herself that was very unique. And so those were kind of really moments that I wanted to share, because I also felt like I had seen this with other families and other people who were living with dementia. I wanted to share that there were opportunities, that dementia is not all about loss, that there's, of course, as we age, we are going to experience loss, but we're also going to have, new possibilities to look at life differently. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to convey in the film.
That's wonderful, Rea. Thank you so much for that. And I think we should start by saying that the film is titled Wisdom Gone Wild, which is such an evocative, wonderful title. And one thing I want to ask is, we're having this conversation to mark April happens to be National Minority Health Month. And one of the things that is more in the news than it used to be, not enough, is the difference in experiences around dementia, around acceptance of dementia, around diagnosis and treatment, from neighborhood to neighborhood, from culture to culture. And one of the things that in your documentary filmmaking, you have, and in this film, you have reflected on your cultural heritage. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about whether you think what your mom experienced, what you experienced, your family experienced, was inflected by your particular cultural backgrounds.
It's hard for me to say because I feel like, dementia is so unique to every person and how it affects them and what they'll do, where their mind goes. But I tried to include some of the really fascinating aspects of my mother and just in terms of her cultural heritage, because I mean, for instance, this is one thing that I was just floored by, but, growing up, so, my mother, and this is in the film, my mother was incarcerated during World War II in a camp, U.S., concentration camp. And one of the outcomes was after people were, released from the camps, they were told not to, they were discouraged from speaking Japanese, and they were told not to speak Japanese. My parents spoke Japanese to each other, but then when we would ask them to teach us, they would say, oh no, we can't teach you because we don't speak the proper form. We just speak this very, country dialect, and it's not appropriate. But of course, my brother and I would we would just mimic them. And anyways, but we only heard her really speak it in the home, and we only heard her speak it with like this one relative who, was from Japan. And so we would hear her speak then. And it would always be surprising because we would just, we would see that relative very often. But then as soon as we would go to their house, suddenly she's fluent in Japanese, after we'd say, no, but we want to hear you. And she would just say, no, I don't speak Japanese. And then suddenly she would be speaking. But so one day, my mom and I were in Los Angeles, and we're driving down, and I want to go to Little Tokyo for something. I don't remember what. And all of a sudden she starts speaking in Japanese, and I'm like, what? And she's reading the signs, and that was the other thing I would say, Mom, what does that say? When I was growing up, we'd see some Japanese print. She said, oh, I can't read that. I don't know. And suddenly she's reading all these signs, and I'm like floored, So, and then we got out, and she starts talking in Japanese to these, and people are like thinking like, oh, here's this Japanese woman. And I'm just like laughing, kind of going, oh, but, like, again, like there was something that whether it was an inhibition and she had, suppressed that ability, it was there and she was accessing it. It was just so completely amazing. And I think the other thing was that she did talk a lot to her family members who had passed, and but just very spontaneously, and was having these very real conversations with people that weren't there. And but I accepted it. I was like, she's talking to her ancestors, and I believe it. And and there were lots of little weird stories with that, but it was great. And then I think the sharing you see at the end of the film, where there were lots of things that I never heard her talk about, that she opened up and just discussed with me. And, certainly people might say, well, was that true? Did she just make that up? But they were very detailed, and I think very, very real. And we kind of like poked around and did some research and connected those things to real events. So it was really interesting. So those kinds of things were really, I guess, really important markers,
I think one of the things that you've said, and we'll talk about some more, is that you learned to accept that things were different. But you've also said so beautifully that you are convinced that had it not been for your and her experiences with her dementia, that there would have been sealed parts of your mom that you would not have gotten to know. And I think one of the things that we think about a lot at Arts is, yes, the opportunities. It's a hard sell to convince anyone
Yeah.
who has lived through watching a beloved family member with dementia. It's a hard sell to say, isn't it wonderful? That's not what we're saying, just to be very clear. But I think you mentioned, is it possible that, we're speaking metaphorically here, is it possible that the filters and the self-censorship that takes place through our so-called normal executive function, when we are released from that, we now have an opportunity to show much more of ourselves.
Right.
And that is an opportunity, right?
It is. I mean, I think I was thinking that as well, that that my mom, yeah, she was able to kind of become this more expressive person, and that was such a interesting gift. She suddenly, like, she became this almost like a public figure, a little mini celebrity in her assisted living. This woman, my mom was always like this, don't look at me, kind of hiding, but, sort of person. And then I would come and visit her, and suddenly she's commanding court in the dining hall, like, and someone said to me, I think it was the executive director, yeah, one day she just started humming, and then she started singing, and then pretty soon everybody in the dining hall was singing with her. And she just, yeah, it's funny, like, okay, this is really, yeah, really interesting how she was able to kind of, yeah, come let go and kind of be very engaging with people. And people wanted to, they were drawn to her. I would see this time and time and again, going out in public, watching people kind of go, oh, who is this person, and want to say hi. I mean, the other thing that maybe on the downside, that but was also very opened my eyes, was that we also, sometimes got negative attention, and then I was open to what somebody who lives with a disability experiences, because there was a lot of, like, sort of, what are you doing, and looking at me weird, or looking at my mother would say something, it wasn't completely linear, but it made sense to me. But then people were sort of afraid of her, and then, it also made me think more about what that's like, and what, how to see how a film like this, was important. It was important to normalize the aging process. It's important to, make people who are living with dementia, make them visible, because people have a lot of preconceptions, and a lot of, they would come up to me and say, oh my goodness, oh, how are you, this is so awful, and does she recognize you, and does this, all these kinds of things that people have been hearing about what dementia is. And it's not to say it's always like, a bed of roses and happy, but I feel like it's just a new way to say, this is part of life. We do start to change, we do start to lose some of our abilities, but this, somehow living with that and going through that is opening up this other aspect about living. So the human condition, I guess. But yeah.
No, absolutely. And one of the questions,
I think, if you could, the investments that one can make towards quality of life, it's going to be very subjective from person to person, but if you can cue into that makes it so much easier. And I think that's what the art part was for us. It's like, oh, she likes to do this and I like to do this. We can have this, kind of fun time because we'll have something we can enjoy together that we like to do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the questions that we've been talking about in this series is something we'll come to a little later about what changes do you see through your own experience, through the experience of making the film, through the experience of now probably talking to a whole lot of care partners around the world. What changes do we need to make in order for that quality of life to be front and center, both for people experiencing dementia-related conditions and for care partners? Before we get to that, little self-serving here. I mean, I started by saying that at Arts, everything that we do, everything that we achieve is thanks to partnership and collaboration. And so I'm wondering if you would humor me a little bit and talk about how our paths crossed and yeah, and anything you'd like to say about that.
Of course. So yeah, I want to say congratulations for the 10-year anniversary.
Thank you.
And I kind of found you guys on the internet. I had just been reading articles, about the research, about the effect of art on the brain. And somehow I was looking for you guys. I was looking for an organization. Then I was like, hey, in my own backyard, here's this really cool organization. And I opened the website. I was like almost jumping up and down, it was like, and I think I really excitedly wrote you an email and I'm like, hey, hi. And then we, you wrote me back and we had a nice conversation on email. And then I think I might have left. I feel like I was on my way. Maybe I was on my way on my sabbatical to go, film that last year with my mom. So I think that, from there we've always stayed in touch. I wish I was around more to do more with you guys and I always, at every chance I get, try to really tell people about your work. And I think that it's been really, it's like you've been this anchor in the community in terms of making dementia visible to, the community, making it known that there is a space for art and that it's a way for people to, connect and engage. So I've been very grateful for your work. Yeah, I think also you've introduced me to a lot of really wonderful people. And you are so well respected in the community. So that's been great. And I'm very grateful. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
it's a pleasure to talk to you too. Just I love the programming that you've been doing. Well, there's all the programs are amazing, but I was really floored by this program with the mentorships with Jefferson.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Rea. One of the things that I want to reflect back to you is that in your teaching, you have been extremely generous, both with your students and with us, in introducing students to the work that we do and introducing us to the work that they do. And I think, there is your life as a filmmaker and as the chronicler, really, of, in the case of Wisdom Gone Wild, the chronicler of this extraordinary journey of your mother's and yours. But I think also as a teacher, as a mentor, you have exposed maybe a generation of students to your sensibilities in doing documentary filmmaking, but furthermore, the subtleties and both the sorrows and the joys around dementia. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how your students have experienced your experience?
Well, they sometimes had to be subjected to many rough edits, um, which at the time I wasn't sure, like, what am I doing? Is this okay? But was really lovely is that they kind of came with me on that journey. And so when the film was done, they were relieved. But they also got to participate in coming to the premiere in Philadelphia. And it was, it was also really lovely to see. And this is not just a Temple, although Temple students are wonderful and they have been really on board for this. But I've gone to different universities and had very positive and very connected responses, which I thought maybe there wouldn't be. I thought they would be bored by, oh, it's this film about this old woman and, la la la, middle-aged person. Yeah, yeah. But no, they were like really experiencing this and saying, my grandma and my mom and this and da da da, my dad. And so a lot of them related to watching their grandparents go through this journey. And they were kind of, they felt very strongly that they wanted to share the film with their family, which is great. And people have come up to me, just said, oh, I'm so glad I saw your film. It helped me understand what was going on with my grandma. This one person who assisted me said, oh, I just went home for the first time since the pandemic. His family's in Korea. And he said, I saw my grandmother and it's so different now. She's in dementia, but had I not seen your film, I would not have known what to expect. And it helped me to accept it. I just remember, so that made me really happy, that it's helping them maybe come to terms with it a little easier. Yeah.
And to have the imaginative resources to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I think, all of us who work in this space have the same feeling that you do. Oh, people under 30 are not going to be interested in this. It's so not the case.
Yeah.
And so I think your students have been really lucky, and we've been lucky to see them being lucky. We can go around in this circle for a while now.
Nice is that the festivals will say, oh, we're going to put this for the senior programming. And I'll say, oh, that's fine. But, like, honestly, this is this is an opportunity to have this intergenerational programming, because trust me, there are younger people who are very interested in this film. I teach them. They're not just saying this for the grade. They're sincerely interested and they're very intrigued by the film. I think it's not your usual approach to telling this story, so that they do connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are lessons in that across the board, that this is not exclusively the purview of the middle-aged and the older, right? So let's go back to the question that I referred to, which is, you've already spoken a little bit about why you feel it was important to do this film. So let's talk about what you observed during, it was 15 years, right? 15 years?
Like 16 years, yeah.
16 years, yeah. Things that you witnessed, things you observed. If we are to learn how to value and bring front and center quality of life for people as they age and for people living with dementia, what needs to change, in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. I feel like the normalizing, the normalizing of aging, the aging process, and especially as it pertains to cognitive changes, because I think the way the ageism goes is that we say, oh, that person's losing it, or they're not with it anymore. And, there's this kind of, fear. And then there's that discrimination, right? Oh, that person doesn't understand. And there's something about being able to slow oneself down and really connect and listen. And in that connecting and listening, the person who's maybe elder can also feel that they're being heard. And then when that they feel they're being heard, they really do open up, and there's a lot of stories and wisdom to be shared.
Mm.
And so those are really important. They're very simple. Well, the acceptance about changes is like, that's the society that we have to change, because it's all about productivity. If you can't produce anymore, you're no longer valuable, and you have to be put to pasture, and you have to be somewhere hidden. And that part of it was painful for me to come to terms with. And it was something that I was guilty of myself. I always thought, and also there was this thing about, there was a big mystery about what happens to people when they age. Oh, I will never do this when I get older. I will never be one of those people, and then every day I go, oh, I don't know if I can, but we sort of have to accept this in ourselves first, right? That like, yeah, we're not going to have all of our abilities all of our lives. No matter what we do, something will change. So something about really accepting that aging is a part of life. And we should embrace it. And the society also should, somehow value that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And all the systems. And that's hard. That's hard to shift, right?
It is. It is. There's so many questions I want to ask, and we don't have a lot of time. So I would ask, tell us about the title in fact, I am asking. Tell us about the title to your film, Wisdom Gone Wild, because I think that directly relates to what you've just said.
Right. So the title has a lot of layers of meaning. I mean, on the top layer, and probably the most obvious is, wisdom gone wild. We think of wisdom as being connected to elders. So it's the wisdom gone wild. Perhaps dementia is a wisdom that's gone wild. And then there's another level. I'm probably going to botch this, but it's the Buddhist. There is a Buddhist teaching called crazy wisdom, or wisdom. It's called crazy wisdom or wisdom gone wild, and it has to do with when a spiritual teacher, a highly, someone who is a highly practiced lama, sometimes imparts a lesson to the student, and they will sometimes take on crazy behaviors, act outrageously. And if the student is not present, they will attach to the behavior and think that there's something wrong. But when the student is present, they will see through the behavior and understand that their teacher is still their teacher at the center. So in the same regard, it's the same thing. This was actually a teaching that my spiritual teacher told me, and it was to remember that my mother was still my mother, even though she might be carrying on or acting wild or throwing things or yelling or whatever, that really I had to sort of slow down and become very present and look through that and just see that she was really still that woman that I knew all along. She had not really changed. She was the same person at the core.
That's so touching and so beautiful. So what do you hope that your film and the work you do in general, and perhaps even the work we do together, will affect change? All these small questions I have for you, no consequence, right?
I I really can only hope that people who watch the film will walk away with a shift in their awareness or their thinking, maybe planting a seed, because nothing happens very quickly, but maybe planting a seed to think about how might they react or relate differently to the people who are in their life who are elderly. How might they be, will this take away a little, a bit of the fear that we all carry about aging? And, can we also rethink our systems of care? That's a big one, but, maybe we all have to sort of start to rethink that as this generation, as we are, moving closer to, as we age.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on? Well, actually, there's a huge thing we haven't touched on. I think that you should share some of what has happened since the film was released, because I think the response to the film gives hope. So please tell us about how the film has been received.
It's been received with a lot of enthusiasm, and we've had some wonderful opportunities to screen the film outside of the US, but across the US. And it's won some awards. And we're talking to people in the medical humanities and medical ethics, and who are very interested and very intrigued and really want to also. I just got an email this morning from someone who's in medical humanities, and she said, oh, I have, some CNAs and is it LPNs? I always get the designations, but she's got some nursing students in her classes, and she said, oh, this would be really great for them to see. So those are ways that I think, if we can shift things, the thinking within the medical community, that would be wonderful. And also just on the personal level, just for people who, for families, for caregivers, people who are, aging, yeah.
Rea, is there anything that we haven't talked about that in these conversations about change you feel we should have talked about?
I'm hoping to also do a lot of community screenings as well, maybe to communities that might not be able to go or hear about the film through a film festival, or might not be in some of these other spaces. So I'm thinking that's another, level, because I've had a few people who said to me, just share their experiences with taking care of somebody, an elderly person, and how can we get this film? So I don't know, that's something down the road that we're trying to figure out. And just to say thank you, I want to say thank you to Arts for the amazing programs that you've been building, and how exciting it's been to see the innovations and the creative work that you're doing, the way that your programming works. It's really exciting. So
thank you. Thank you. Well, Rea, congratulations again. I think I met you when you were just starting on this film, maybe. And it's such a thrill to see, not only see it come to fruition in such a beautiful way, but also to see, our care partners talk about the ripple effects when there's joy, when there's meaningful engagement, the ripple effects. And I think the ripple effects of Wisdom Gone Wild have just begun. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. And
absolutely.
And here's to many more conversations and lots more change.